how to get and then keep more women in our workforce, our transportation and our trucking. We have Stephanie Shrum from the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum on the show this week, and that's what we're discussing. And it applies to both sides of the border. Let's welcome Stephanie.
Welcome to the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast.
Stephanie, welcome to the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast. Can you please do a brief introduction of yourself?
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited to join you. I'm Stephanie Shrum. I'm from the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum, and I'm a program manager with that organization.
And what the heck does a program manager do?
That's a great question. You let me know if you find out.
Perfect. That sounds like my
So we have a number of different programs that we run here at the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum. We're going to talk about a couple of them today. And my job is just to come up with some of the ideas, but largely to manage all of the different folks that are included and make sure everyone has what they need to deliver these programs. And I'm just super excited to be able to do that because I think some of them are really cool.
Cool. And before we lose too many of our American listeners, many of the things that you're talking about today apply both in Canada and to our friends in the United States. So don't leave us, please, American listeners. Hang in.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
The first thing is welcome to transportation and trucking, and we need more women in our trade. How in the heck are we going to achieve that?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a number of different ways you can achieve that. We actually wrote a guide on that at the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum. So we do have some real resources available that are for free on our website. Actually, it's going to be a bit of a long answer. So what we would recommend to folks who are looking to increase the number of women in their organization is firstly to not do it alone. There are so many different organizations whose purpose is to help get people into employment. And some of them are specific to women. And their whole job, and I'm just going to mention the Office to Advance Women Apprentices here in Canada because I work with them very closely and I'm working with them on a project right now. And their job is to help employers find women and women find employers. And in each of the provinces and territories, and I'm sure you have resources very similar in the United States, we have government-funded resources whose job is to help people find each other. And it's free. And they will do some vetting. They help people with their resumes and interviews. But more importantly, they help employers to find the folks that they're looking for, find really good candidates. And they can do a lot of that even on initial onboarding piece. Some of the programs here will provide funding to employers to help pay for some of the initial training. So my first recommendation is don't do it alone. Secondly is to think very creatively about how have you always done your job search or your job posting, and what can you add on to it? So part of it is working with employment agencies. And here in Ontario, they're funded through Employment Ontario. Part of it is also looking at how can I connect with the schools, so the colleges, because they have targets as well. They have employment targets. They want you to connect with them. They want to get their people out there. So can I connect with universities? Can I connect with colleges? Can I connect with training schools? Can I connect with trade organizations who might have people looking for employment? So that would be my first suggestion in trying to increase the number of women is to find the organizations who are there to help you and connect with them. That's their job. That's what they really want to do.
One of the problems, from what I understand, obviously with my beard and everything, I'm not a woman, so I can't imagine this exactly from that point of view. But transportation specifically, many of the trades have not been female friendly. When I've heard of stories when women join a company, inappropriate comments and jokes, even washrooms are not readily available. are there resources? Is there training? How do you re-educate us men mostly? Because well, honestly, we're on the
Yep.
bad side of it. Is there something that an employer could do to make their company more attractive to women?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that we encourage is for employers to do, we call it culture audit. It sounds really serious. I mean, it is in terms of its outcomes, but what we encourage employers to do is take a look at how does our current culture operate? How are people feeling when they're here? And you can do that in a number of different ways. The federal government, in combination with Electricity HR, actually has a tool. It's called Equal by 30, because they're hoping to have the trades equal by 2030. And that's a really easy tool to use. But ultimately, we would say, look at your culture first, see if there are any areas where perhaps maybe this isn't as welcoming as I want it to be for women coming into my organization. And then I would encourage employers to work with organizations in your industry who have the resources and can really help you to implement some amazing programs. So, for example, Women in Trucking, they're sort of oriented toward encouraging more women to get into the industry, but also encouraging employers to make it more welcoming and just change the culture a little bit. We have DEI resources all over the place. So DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so some of those things, like, for example, I'm thinking of the construction industry right now because that's where I'm a little bit more familiar, but we do have tools like Inclusive Workplace. And that would be true of any organization. I mean, building an inclusive workplace is an inclusive workplace. It can transfer from construction to trucking to wherever to rail. And we also have a number of different speakers actually on our trades talent platform who do justice, equity, inclusion training with employers. And that's what they do. That's their job, is to go and work with employers to increase some of the knowledge around inclusion in their organization. So there's lots of different training resources out there. At CAF, we run a Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee who have a number of people who are incredibly knowledgeable. And we would be, happy to connect folks with the right resources.
Oh, lots of opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really big part of our focus at CAF is building equality within the trades and really helping employers, because people want that, right? I mean, even if you think about being a person who's traditionally been in the trade, you still want to be treated well. You still want to be treated as though you have value. You still want to have an environment that feels safe. So many of these strategies are true of a lot of different kinds of people and groups of people.
Yeah, when years ago I was talking to, there's an American organization you've probably heard of, WIT, Women in Trucking. And I was talking to the founder, and she said much the same thing. She said, Chris, if we improve lighting at a truck stop because women feel unsafe, didn't we improve it for the men too?
Right?
She said, if we improve storage in a tractor, because typically women are shorter than men and women have a harder time reaching it, didn't we also improve it for the short men out there?
Make total sense. Yeah.
So many of the things, that we just take for granted, also help when we make the adjustments and the improvements for everybody. So cool.
Absolutely. Right. And I mean, I could go on for hours about, if you do this for women, doesn't that also help the men?
Yeah, exactly. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. Men are just too tough to want to get to it. That's the problem. But, after the fact, I go, oh, yeah, that is better. I kind of like that. That made my job a little, but don't want to admit it because they're big wussies.
Right.
The big reasons I'm, as a safety person, and I know John feels this way, as a safety person, typically, take that brush out and paint everybody with the same thing. Women don't take as many risks as men. Therefore, that translates generally into women are safer truck drivers and better at it often than men, because they tend to be risk adverse as a general statement. Although I live here in Hamilton, and I'm telling you, every car that passes me in the last 2 years, typically it's a woman now. They seem to be adapting, we'll call it that, to aggressive driving.
Trying to get somewhere,
Yeah, yeah. Got things to do.
But-
Multitasking more than men.
Generally speaking, they are a safer type of truck driver, statistically.
Yeah.
So, from a safety point of view, damn it, we could sure as hell use more women in the trucks. Right, Johnny?
Oh, big time. Big time. There's no doubt about that. Well, and usually that brush you paint people with, sometimes you have to use it to beat a couple people with it. And 9 times out of 10, you don't have to use it on the ladies because they, as you say, it's proven they're much safer. They're calmer. They're more relaxed. So,
And
better organized.
some of the things, well, if we've got some women that are interested, just to give a shout out, years ago when I was a recruiter, and this is many years ago for a trucking company, we had dedicated auto parts runs. And Steph, that may not mean anything to you, but a dedicated run in auto parts, it's a dry van trailer. It's got the barn door or the roll up. The hardest thing the driver has to do is open up the trailer door. It's all low touch freight. You know what time you've got to arrive, so you know what time you've got to leave. And generally, auto parts are needed on the assembly line. So there's very little waiting at the doors. So you get offloaded and then you're coming home. And I'll tell you, I could not recruit women. Now, this was a 7-day-a-week operation, 24 hours a day. But if you were on a dedicated run, you had a schedule.
Interesting.
And
Do you mind sharing where you were recruiting and what sort of strategies you were using? Like, so women weren't applying at all?
well, and this is a long time ago when women weren't as much in the industry.
Right.
Out of 800 drivers at that time, I had one woman. So, and as I said, this is probably 40 years ago. My mistake, I'm sure, is that I didn't change my advertising. I was advertising in a recruiting magazine, was about the only place we advertised, because that kept our trucks full at the time. And it was the same ad, and it was a text-based ad, no pictures, if I remember, with our logo. And I'm sure it talked about the same thing that every trucking ad talks about is, this is how much per mile and we treat you really well. And
Yeah. Yeah. But it probably didn't I'm sure it didn't at the time because we have just kind of started doing this in ad, but it probably didn't talk too much about how it's a family friendly environment because you're able to work specific hours. Probably didn't talk a lot about things like if you had parental leave that was covered or benefits that covered childcare and those sorts of things. So things that are really appealing to women who are primary child caregivers for the most part. I mean, certainly families have changed a lot over time, but still we see that women tend to hold most of the responsibility for childcare. So things that we're encouraging employers to think about when they're recruiting women is, are you being really upfront about the different ways in which you accommodate family? I think I don't know if you focused on your hours are very dedicated. They're the same. You've got a schedule that you can count on. It's consistent and stable. And that applies to any caregiver, really. Anyone who has children in their family and do childcare, I'm sure care deeply about things, right? But we do tend to see one of the number one barriers for women specifically in the trades is the childcare.
Yeah. And again, this is going back. I'm old, so I can go back many years. But I went on, and this has little to do with trucking, but I went on a tour of an auto parts factory. I believe it was a Toyota down in Kentucky. And one of the things they pointed out in the tour is that they have a separate building that is personed by a nurse. And if you have a sick child at home, instead of missing your shift, bring the child where they have a dedicated medical professional there to take care of the child. And I thought, holy crap, this is really innovative. And part of the reason they did that is they had rewards for 100% attendance.
Mhm.
And so if they're rewarding 100% attendance, and as you just said, women typically are the primary caregiver, well, that was a barrier for them. So they tried really hard to remove the barrier by giving the women the option, or by
Cool.
giving the family member really the option of bringing a sick child to have them taken care of by a medical professional.
That's amazing. That's very innovative. Wow. Good for
Mhm.
that.
And this was, as I say, many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they had two sections, they told me, in that building. One was a daycare, so that if you needed daycare service, you had that. And the other part was, I'll call it a sick bay. I'm sure they had a better term for it.
We know what you mean.
But
Yep.
can you imagine if, a trucking company was to offer something like that?
Mhm.
That would open, that's got to crank the doors open. So anyway, what else is happening? Sorry. Let's get back on subject here.
Yeah.
Because, well, I mean,
It's Friday. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, but we don't know when this is going to air. So
Yeah.
what else?
It'll be a Friday.
Yeah. What else are you doing to help get women, not just into trades, but do you have any specific initiatives for trucking?
we do have the initiative that we have that's specific to trucking right now is we are doing events like this, where we go around and we speak with employers about here are some of the strategies that we'd recommend for recruiting if you're not using them already. Here are the organizations that are available to you to help you in your journey as you kind of transition into maybe some new candidates. But in addition to that, retention is a really big part of what we're focusing on when we're speaking with employers. So we're talking to them a lot about, okay, now that you've gotten the women here, that's amazing. That's a great start. How are you going to keep them?
Mhm.
What does that look
Mhm.
like? And so a big part of the guide that we created, the recruiting retention guide, is a lot about how are you doing the training and onboarding? What does that look like? How are you setting expectations with people? Do the folks that are coming into your organization know who, first of all, their sort of primary mentor is? And then from there, do they know how to ask difficult questions? Do they know who to go to if they're having a challenge and they need to get it resolved? Do they know what's expected of them, what their milestones are, and are they aware of their peers' milestones as well, so that they kind of know where they fit into the structure of your organization? So there's just a lot that we're trying to do with employers around here's how you can help set new people up for success. And here's how you can help the women and just people really
Yeah.
to stay in your organization and to want to grow. And in addition to that, we actually do have a couple of programs at CAF for mentorship and for leadership for women in the trade. And our thought on that and what we've seen through a lot of the research that we've done is that women tend to feel isolated, and they don't tend to see themselves in leadership positions a lot because there just aren't as many women in leadership roles. And because of that, it can feel a little bit like maybe this isn't for me, or maybe I don't belong here because I don't see myself in roles that are a little bit higher up maybe than perhaps the apprentice role or an early journey person role. And or in trucking and driving, I guess I'm not as sure of what your hierarchy might be in terms of going from a driver to other roles, management perhaps, or a fleet operator maybe. But so our goal is to try and then provide the skills in terms of in terms of leadership and in terms of mentoring others, so that women take on these roles either formally or informally, but they can show there's a lot of great opportunity. And then also the women coming into the trade have a higher chance of having a woman as a mentor. And that might just help with some of that onboarding. It might just help feeling a sense of community, and with a sense of seeing kind of the next steps in the career progression.
Cool. Yeah. Sorry, say you've used the acronym a couple of times, CAB. And I just want to make sure our listeners know exactly what that is. What is it?
So when I say CAP, I mean the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum.
So that leads me into my next kind of section. And here in Canada, there is a group of people that are starting to really push hard, trying to make truck driving an apprenticeship, a formal trade. Can we talk about that a little bit as we move on?
Yeah. Is there anything specific you'd like to talk about?
How the hell are we going to achieve it? It is so needed.
Long overdue.
And now I'll spout an opinion. Currently to get an AZ license here in Ontario, you do 103.5 hours of training plus your air brake, so it's another 10, and you're quota truck driver. When hairdressers do thousands of hours of training. And what the heck? And when's the last time a hairdresser killed a client? Where truck drivers, unfortunately, that happens far more frequently.
Yep.
So I really believe we have to elevate driving as a trade, make it a profession. How are we going to go about and convince our government, and even in the States, this has to be done, I believe. How are we going to convince governments? They're very difficult to make them move.
Well, I mean, firstly, I'll say there is a reason that there's multiple steps, and it's because there's competencies that need to be in place. There's oversight regarding those competencies. You've got to have trade schools available to do the training. So there's a number of different reasons that it is a little bit complicated to get a trade to be a red seal, or just a skilled trade in general that's apprenticeable. But the red seal, so here in Canada, unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with the process in the States, but here in Canada, we do have on our redseal.ca site, there is actually the steps outlined to make a trade, a red seal trade. And so you would need to go through those appropriate steps. But one of the biggest things that tends to be influential is if industry also believes that it's really important. So if employers are saying, you know what, I actually would really like to have the opportunity to provide more training. I would love for someone to tell me which competencies are really necessary in order for these people to be able to move forward. And also associations, so in next week, I think it is, I'm going to be chatting with the Professional Truck Training Association of Canada to talk a little bit more about what they're doing to move the process forward. But the really big thing is having the folks who are going to need to do the training on your side and saying, absolutely, we really want to be able to provide this training. We want to be able to work with a lot more of the training schools to get more competencies within our drivers. We think that safety piece is really important. And then it's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of filling out applications and moving them forward, and getting letters of support from the employers, from associations, from trade schools, and getting those in front of the people who make the decision.
I know some of the people that are involved, and
yes,
I know you're involved, and they are some of the smartest and the brightest and most dedicated transportation professionals in the industry. So there's a good team pushing. Hopefully we can get the government to listen and go through all the appropriate steps, because it's not anything that is remarkable that you are proud of takes a lot of work. And so, I don't want to lower the standards. I want to raise our standards to meet the Red Seal criteria.
Yes.
Because I truly believe trucking is a trade that professionals...
It's long overdue. It should have been addressed years ago. It's something that's been lacking in our industry for a long time. And it's a shame. It really is a shame. There are other roles in other industries that you sit and go, well, I'll use the example Chris did, hairdresser. It's like, well, what's the worst you can do? Lop off my ear? But it's like, why has there been so much attention paid to that? But then this very dangerous role, and they've said it's a very tough role for anybody that gets into it. Why are we not providing more guidance, more training for these individuals to be better at the role?
I mean, I don't know that answer, but
I'm not looking for you to have it, but it's that hypothetical question to go, jeepers, people, we got to, everybody has to put their heads together and realize what's going on out there. You see it in the media, you see it in the trucking media. It's all over the place. Our current process of training new drivers and young people into this industry is atrocious. We are literally killing people for no reason at all. And there needs to be more done about it. And the Red Seal program would be a huge step up.
And Stephanie, understand what John just said. It's the process today is greatly improved over 10 years ago. To give kudos to Ontario, it was the first jurisdiction in North America to come up with a minimum training program for tractor trailer. And it's finally being adopted. I think it's in all provinces now.
Pretty much all provinces now. Yeah.
A very similar standard in all the provinces. And the United States recently did something, I don't want to say similar because it's quite different, but they also have a minimum training standard. So it was, in my opinion, what Ontario did, it was a good starting point. And now we're at the point where we can improve this. And apprenticeship is the next step, I believe, to making that ultimate improvement to it.
I think it could take it tenfold, if not more.
I mean, any enhancements to consistency in the training, to the regulations within your safety curriculum specifically, but I mean, anytime that you're increasing the consistency, you're increasing the standards, you're increasing the knowledge and confidence within the people that are driving the trucks, you're going to have better results. You're going to have safer, crew in general, right? I mean, we see that all the time, and that's a really big part of why we care so much about apprenticeship.
And a lot of, don't get me wrong, a lot of what we're looking for in the industry is not to say it needs to be government mandated to say you need to make sure the drivers do this, this, and this. There has to be onus put on to the employers of this industry. They need to be held accountable, held accountable, but to have standards in place to say, hey, a driver now has to have this, and go through these programs and steps and whatnot to validate their ability to get behind the wheel of a tractor trailer with 18 wheels on it, carrying 80,000 plus pounds. There needs to be standards in place to hold these employers accountable, because unfortunately, they're the ones that are really unscrupulous at times and just going, oh, guy's got his license, throw him in a truck, send him on his way. And the guy's going, I don't even know where the blinker switch is. So.
And it can also, too, for employers be overwhelming when you have new people and you want them trained, but you don't necessarily have the material to train them with, or
where
maybe
to
you
go,
don't know
resources.
the levels of different competencies that each person is going to need because it's never been provided to you. So you're just, you're maybe going on the internet to figure out what's going to be really important here for new training for new people, but or maybe you've got a lot of years of experience and you're exceptional at it. But if you're a newer organization or you're a really small employer and you've got a number of different things that pull on your attention all the time, if you don't have a structured system that's provided to you, it's really hard to know what is really important and crucial to ensure that my staff has before I let them go out on the road. And if you have something like an apprenticeable trade, that tells you very clearly, here are your competencies. And also you're now working with trade schools that are going to give them a bunch of those competencies as well. And you can feel confident that they're all getting the same thing.
Right. And you've got different standards in place and you've got the availability to access resources.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's one of the biggest things that I want our listeners and viewers to hear is that there are resources available, and there's a number of them down in the show notes down below. So, Stephanie, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. This is a really important topic, how to get women into trades and specifically into trucking, but also by making it more welcoming to women, it's going to make it a better place for men. So it's It sounds kind of familiar. Stephanie, last word to you.
Oh, thank you. So thank you, first of all, so much for having me. I would just encourage you, if you're looking to increase the different kinds of people that you're recruiting, you're looking to have more people in your organization who are women or gender diverse folks or from equity priority groups, or you're really just looking for opportunities and resources to increase the skill set of the women that you have in your organization, or you're really just looking to learn more about apprenticeship, please go to the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum. We have a ton of different resources. We'd love to be able to help you. We're a national not-for-profit, so everything we do is geared towards just helping folks, in the apprenticeship world or in the world of trade.
Thank you, Steph. If you picked up some tips this week, please click the like and subscribe buttons. And we appreciate it so much. Leave us a comment. And John or I, or both of us, will answer your comments. Have a great week. See you next week on the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast.